So I'm just going to talk about a few things. So I'm going to tell a story about what happened like at my college. So I'm part of a college. We have 3 campuses. So we have 2 junior campuses that are 7 to 10 and 1 senior campus that's 11 to 12. And a part of that is really about, there's always a shit fight in these places, which is about how do teachers get access to those stage 6 classes. But before I talk about that story, I'm going to go through some ideas that have been rattling around my head regarding how working class communities have changed really since the 1930s and how that's had an impact upon unionism, which is essentially like a decentralisation of communities, and how I think that plays into what we do at schools today, and how I think that the most important thing that we can do is actually build relationships with people, obviously through unionism and community values and things like that. So I'm going to talk about briefly from the 1930s. So really the 1930s in the Western world, you had this high point of unionisation. You had a lot of people, obviously you had the industrialisation of the Western world, and really you had good unionists on the ground who had worked out how to unionise factories, how to unionise textile mills and places like that. And a lot of that was because you also had, a lot of these people would live close by their place of work and they would socialise with each other outside of that place of work. So it really took people about 20 or 30 years to do that. But since that time, what we've seen is that there's been an economic and housing decentralisation. So you've had people that have moved further away from their places of work, and also you've had the rise of the services economy as well. So you really have, like, you know, your massive businesses, for example, something like, I know they're evil, but something like Starbucks, right, which is huge international conglomerate, right, but they have these small coffee shops everywhere. And so the question is like, well, if you are going to unionise those people, and if they are going to be effective, how can we do that today? You also have the rise of suburbia, which means longer commutes for people going to work, which really weakens the organic connection that workers have with each other, because they're not going to the same pubs, they're not going to the same religious institutions, they're not playing in the same sports leagues as what they used to when they all lived in the same area. And yes, you've had the service sector dominance as well, so, which is, as I was talking about, that's inherently decentralised. They are decentralised, and that can reduce the capacity of workplace density as well, like less people in the workplace. The challenges that I think that this produces to modern unionism is that, so I was talking about the lack of pre-existing communal ties. Right, when people are working together and you know their family, you hang out with them regularly, it's easy to have those conversations with them about unionism and politics. When you lack that connection, it's almost like you have to have a far more conscious approach to foster that with people. And that's really where a lot of the effort and energy lies, you know, particularly when we're so stressed out with all the other things happening in the workplace and in our private lives as well. Union victories are no longer spread virally through word of mouth. So if we think about our situation in the schools context, you might have a school that's had an amazing win, right? But how many other schools around that actually are aware of that? How can you then spread that message out to people? Obviously, through our union, we do have association meetings, right? But even that, there are limitations within that as well. And so that just makes those things harder. And a lot of this requires what I describe as active fostering of solidarity. So it's about trying to recreate those community solidarity that people have with each other in the context of your workplace as best as possible. And then thinking about, like, when I talk about the college in a moment, a lot of it was really like this term that I've come across in some of the readings I've been doing is called socialise before organise. So it's really about getting people together at social events and just like talking to them about, you know, about your life, about their lives, about things that people are going through, but a sort of more one-on-one, personable, I think way can help break down a lot of these barriers. I think that's really important. I think that there is a space. I know social media is fucking evil. I'm reading this book at the moment called The Twittering Machine. It's all about like how this thing is designed to suck us in to harvest our data so that these, like, you know, the tech billionaires can essentially make a lot of money out of it. But I do think that there is space in that to try and harvest digital tools in a certain way to try and reach people that are a little bit disconnected, or to be able to try and meet with people in virtual spaces like online Zooms and things like that. And I also think that there needs to be more discussion around worker-led models. So obviously we have, like, all unions have staffers, and those staffers are very crucially important for the roles that they do. Obviously, you know, organisers are incredibly important in our union, the professional support officers, the industrial support officers, but we also need, you know, you need larger layers of people on the ground pushing for things in their local context and feeding that around, that then sort of feeds back into the whole thing. If you rely entirely on staffers to drive everything in the union, like, you're just setting up for failure. It's not fair on the staffers, and and I also think that workers need to be able to take a bit of a lead in the way that they can, in the capacity that they're able to. And yes, critical takeaways. So there's things around, like, you know, what sort of tactics have been used historically in unionism, and how can we best apply those into the situation that we have today. We need to prioritize worker-driven networks, and I really think that PWA, like what we're trying to do here, our ultimate aim is something around that. It's about a worker-driven network within the space of public education. Yes, and solidarity requires deliberate cultivation of community, not just workplace activism. So you need to do both together. So with that, I'm going to just talk about what we did at Sydney Secondary College. So we have this thing called the College Staffing Agreement, which sits sort of above the staffing agreement, and it's about how do staff transfer within the college. So staff have an opportunity to transfer within the college before it goes to statewide, right? And we had this big issue that existed for as long as I can remember, and Dave could probably correct me on this, but since I started teaching at Balmain in 2017, really as a casual or temporary teacher, and I, you know, really became full-time temp from halfway through 2020, became Fed Rep in 2021, and then got permanency the year after that. But in terms of the processes that happen for people in the junior campus to be able to get to stage 6, to be able to have some experience at the stage 6 campus, there was no transparency at all. Like, it was just like smoke and mirrors. Someone would get tapped on the shoulder, hey, do you want a job? Come over here, jobs for the boys, like that kind of stuff, you know, which obviously creates a terrible culture around that. We also had a principal at the senior campus who just said, I don't care what the staffing agreement says, I'm going to do things my way. So she would just advertise for jobs via short-term temporary gigs, always through the merit selection process, so that she could have control over those people, rather than trying to move people from the junior campus across. What we saw in the junior campuses, I think, was bad for unionism as a whole. So you had a high turnover of teachers, right? So every year you have 10 or 12 or 13 new teachers coming in out of a staff of 63. Every year this was common practice, right? You had a lot of the older teachers who would leave would take that experience of the school with them, but also essentially that would filter down to, like, kids just having rattier and rattier behaviour, which places an increased burden of workload. So what happened was that in 2021, the beginning of 2021, I was on the committee. We got a committee of people together of like 8 people, and because I was casual in the school, I sort of knew who the good political unionists were. So I went around, I said, we're going to have an election, you're going to be Fed Rep, you're going to be Women's Contact, you should be on the committee, you should be on the committee. So we got a committee together, we were meeting regularly, and all of a sudden there was this like college staffing agreement meeting that was happening. The Fed Rep didn't show up, it was during sport, I wasn't on sport at that time, and where I work in the support unit, we're right next door to the college office. So in a college, there's a college principal, and then you've got a principal for each campus, right? So the college principal is like halfway between a principal and a DEL. I think they earn a ridiculous amount of money a year for what they do. I think something like $200,000, right? Really, they just do admin stuff. I don't even know what they do half the fucking time. But anyway, So they asked me to come in. They're like, oh, can you come in? Can you? And I'm sitting there and I was like, I had no idea what was going on. They were talking about college staffing agreement, throwing all these forms around. I was like I think I was just very confused about the whole process. Something went through. I did go and talk to a lot of members about it, particularly the older people at Balmain, and they were really pissed off about this process. So I knew they're pissed off about it. But in order for us to do anything, we would have to connect with the other Fed reps from the other campuses and sort of have, a collective approach to this. But at that time, the More Than Thanks campaign was happening. So what we did at Balmain is that the committee, we would hang out, I think every 2 weeks, we would just meet, right? We would just chew the fat with each other. We would talk about unionism generally. I think we had some romantic ideas about what we could or couldn't do within the school context, but it was all a lot of fun. But then that sort of fostered a positive union culture amongst like a small layer of people in the school who would then go back and talk to people in their staff rooms about it. And then as the More Than Thanks campaign sped up, like after lockdown, we created a flyer for a union meeting. It's really the first union meeting that had happened since the second union meeting that had happened since I was at the school. The first one that happened, I went to and there was like 6 people there, and the union rep didn't know what he was talking about. And the union rep became a union rep because he was a head teacher and he wanted to put one of his staff on a tip. So that's why he took on that position, right? So this guy was a piece of shit. He left the school, which was good. And so through this process of us, getting this flyer together and going around talking to everyone about it, we were able to connect with people, talk to them about unionism, talk to them about what the issues were within the school, within the education system. We got a meeting off the ground. It was all about the More Than Thanks campaign, and we had like 46 people that rocked up to it. So it's a huge success, and I think from there, things just grew. Like we would have regular drinks after school that people would come to try and foster those community ties. And then from there, what we did is that I knew who the Fed rep was at the Leichhardt campus, and then the Blackwater Bay Fed rep 2022, they didn't have a Fed rep, and we had this like college presentation day together. So there was this guy who was on the Balmain committee who was teaching at Blackwater Bay. So I went to him and I said, you should be the Fed rep. You need to run for it. So we did that. And then myself and the other Fed, like the 3 of us would meet up semi-regularly, like twice a term. And I would just talk to both of them quite candidly about what people in the junior campus wanted. We wanted a transparent process. We knew that this thing wasn't going to be perfect, but we really had to give people a chance. We can't just keep on screwing everyone over because it's bad for unionism. If we have a role as federation in this, we need to make sure we do right by people, And I think we met up like 5 or 6 times. Twice we had drinks with like the committee members of each campus, so it was a way that we could further extend those like social and community ties with each other. And then in 2023, Andrew spent time, because he's the organiser for our association, so he came out, he would meet with us, he gave us a bunch of readings to do about like the staffing agreement and what the processes were and what we were going for and all that kind of stuff. So, we did our homework, we sat down and we said, this is what we want. So then we got all the members together in meetings. Andrew would come out and present the demands that we had put forward as the 3 collective Fed reps. And I think that the whole process leading up to this, I don't think that could have happened without a few things. I think the 3 Fed reps sitting down and talking to each other about it, because there was always this thing like somehow the senior campus thought that we were like a bunch of swine, right, in the junior campuses. And everyone in the junior campus thought, oh, you go to the senior campus to retire because the grass is always greener. So they had this this skewed view of what it was on both sides. So actually sitting down and breaking this down for people and saying, this is really bad for collegiality in our school. This is really bad for like the community. And also, if we want to build power for our side, this is what we need to do. Interestingly, after those meetings took place, the principal, at least on our campus, started to openly talk about how everyone needs stage 6 experience, whereas prior to that, we didn't hear peep out of her for 2.5 years before this process began. And then also the college principal, who's Julie Ross, she said, oh yeah, we've got the draft together, we've taken your demands on, right? She sent it off to Andrew, myself, and the other 2 Fed reps on like a Friday, and then on the Saturday she's like, did you read it? It's really good. Like, no, we haven't read it yet. But basically the most basic demands that we wanted weren't actually inserted in there, because the principals got together and they were like, we're not going to give these guys everything that they want, you know, which is about transparency. We wanted transparency of how is this movement happening, who are on these lists, who get, because you have like lists, you have like a permanent list and a temporary list and a cross-campus list. It's, you know, it's really not that exciting, but it's just about people understanding like what's going on and having that, I guess that power there. But reflecting on it all, I really think like within the college anyway, people saw this sense of what union power could be on a local level, right? I know this has nothing to do with statewide stuff. Most people don't really care what happens in colleges because there's only 15 of them in the state, and that's fair enough, right? But so teachers directly saw how our union efforts, how their union efforts of us getting together in these meetings and putting our demands forward helped to get an outcome that was best for most people within the framework that we could operate within, you know. People were proposing things like, you know, just having a whole full rotation of staff every 3 years or whatever. Like, while that sounds like a good idea, it would be hard to culturally get that off the ground, so we were like, we can't do that, but this is what we can do instead. And I think that it built a solidarity infrastructure within our school. So what we have now is that myself and the other 2 Fed reps are always talking to each other. We have like a WhatsApp group, and everything that we sort of do, like everything that one campus will do if they're fighting around a particular issue, the other campuses will go and assist them, either through advice or having meetings, moving motions in solidarity, you know, things like that. So it feels more like we're on the same page with it as each other. And I also think that it forced the principals to back down a little bit, to understand that actually the union has a role to play here, and you need to understand what the Fed reps are saying and take us seriously, because if you don't take us seriously, we will then have to report this back to the members, and then we will see what action is taken from there. And for me, like thinking about like where we are in the state at the moment, you know, 2,200 and something schools, right? It's good to be able to try and reach out. It doesn't have to be in a college situation, but it could be a school down the road or a school within your association that you know is having an issue, and it might be a similar issue that you've gone through. Like obviously things like air conditioning come up all of the time, right? Schools do not have air conditioning, and there's probably been like 30 or 40 schools in the state that have actually made good wins on air conditioning. So it's like, if you know someone like that, it's a good time to go out and reach out to them and sort of build those, like, you know, ties with each other, try and have like a community or solidarity event around it. Yeah, and I guess things that I want to achieve this year in this context is that I want to have more college-wide social union events. So I want us to get together and have like drinks on Friday afternoon. You know, Federation members come along, let's hang out, let's talk to each other. And then finally, the key takeaways that I, you know, thinking about the points that I said at the start, and then thinking about this I don't know, this story that happened really over the course of 3 years. I think about the importance of socialize before organizing. So relationships, building genuine relationships with people really matter. And doesn't, you know, like, obviously if you're a weirdo like me and you read about politics all the time, there's politics in everything. There's politics in music, there's politics in sport, there's politics in culture. You don't always have to tie that stuff in there like a weirdo, right? But you can sort of like talk to people about these sorts of things. Yeah, don't want to socialize like that. Yeah, just get into a mud wrestle, you know. That's all right. It's gone to a better place. And then having a worker-led democratic organisation and discussions, and I really think that in our union we are really lucky that we can do these things. Like, you can organise your school and you have a lot of scope to be able to do certain things in your school that might not always be necessarily, but always be like absolutely endorsed by, you know, by everyone in the union. But if everyone in your school's on board, then go for it, right? And if you've already built up those relationships with people, pulling these things off is much easier. Like if they know you, if they trust you, and if you trust them. Yes, and I think the thing that I think about is scalable solidarity. So you want to have solidarity with everybody, but you want to be able to make sure that it's concrete and sustainable over a period of time. So if you have networks of people, yeah, that is good. So that's all I had. That's my story, you know. Thank you.